The dust kicked up around Zelda Harrison's boots as she stumbled backward, her hand pressed against the fresh bruise blooming across her cheekbone, and she knew in that moment that running to this god-forsaken town had bought her nothing but borrowed time. Utica, Montana, was supposed to be her salvation, a place so small and forgotten that the men who had destroyed her life back in Denver would never think to look for her here. She had arrived 3 weeks ago with nothing but the clothes on her back and a heart so shattered she wondered if it would ever beat properly again. The boarding house on the edge of town had taken her in, and Mrs. Callahan, the kind widow who ran it, had asked no questions when Zelda paid her first week's rent with the last of her money and immediately took to hiding in her room. But they had found her anyway. It was late August in 1882, and the Montana heat pressed down on everything like a physical weight. Zelda had been at the general store, gathering the courage to buy fabric for a new dress, when she heard that voice, that laugh, the sound that had haunted her nightmares for 6 months. Garrett Mason. She had dropped the bolt of calico and run, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. Back to the boarding house, up the stairs, into her room, where she pressed herself against the door and tried to remember how to breathe. He had brought others with him. She had seen at least 2 more men, their faces hardened and mean, the kind of men who hurt people for sport and got paid well to do it. Now, hours later, as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and blood, Zelda knew she could not stay locked in this room forever. Mrs. Callahan had knocked twice, her voice gentle and concerned, but Zelda could not bring herself to answer. What could she possibly say? That 3 dangerous men had tracked her across 2 territories because she had witnessed something she should never have seen, that they would kill her the moment they got their hands on her, and probably anyone else who got in their way. She was 22 years old, and her life had become a waking nightmare. The knock at her door this time was different, firmer, a man's knock. Zelda's breath caught in her throat. She looked around the small room desperately, searching for anything she could use as a weapon. Her fingers closed around the ceramic water pitcher on the washstand. Miss Harrison? The voice was deep, unfamiliar, with a slight drawl that marked him as someone who had spent his life under open skies. Mrs. Callahan asked me to check on you. Name's Fletcher Zimmerman. I work the cattle ranch north of town. Zelda pressed herself flatter against the wall beside the door, the pitcher raised and ready. I don't need checking on. There was a pause. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, almost gentle. Madam, I saw you running through town this afternoon. Saw the men who scared you too. Mrs. Callahan is worried, and truth be told, so am I. Those men are staying at the saloon, been drinking all evening and talking loud about a pretty dark-haired girl who owes them something. The pitcher nearly slipped from Zelda's sweating palms. What do you want? To help, if you'll let me, but I cannot do that through a locked door. She closed her eyes, weighing her options. She had none, really. If Fletcher Zimmerman wanted to hurt her, a locked door would not stop him. And if he genuinely wanted to help, she desperately needed an ally. Slowly, her hands shaking, she unlocked the door and pulled it open just wide enough to see the man on the other side. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with sun-darkened skin and hair the color of wheat after harvest. His eyes were a startling shade of blue-green, like the shallow parts of a river, and they were looking at her with an expression she had not seen in a long time. Genuine concern. He was perhaps 26 or 27, dressed in worn denim and a faded blue shirt, a hat in his hands that he turned nervously. Thank you, he said simply. Zelda lowered the pitcher slightly but did not set it down. Mrs. Callahan sent you. She did. She's worried sick, and she thought maybe you would talk to someone closer to your own age. Fletcher's eyes flicked to the bruise on her cheek, and something dark passed across his face. Did they do that to you? No. The word came out sharper than she intended. That is old, from before. Before you came to Utica? She nodded stiffly. Fletcher seemed to consider this, his jaw working as though he was chewing over words he was not sure he should say. Finally, he met her eyes again. Miss Harrison, I don't know your story, and you don't owe me an explanation, but I know dangerous men when I see them, and those 3 downstairs at the saloon, they are the kind who leave bodies in their wake. If you are in trouble, if they mean you harm, then you need to know that you are not alone in this town. There are good people here who will stand with you. You don't know what you are saying. Zelda's voice broke despite her best efforts to keep it steady. "These men, they are not just dangerous. They work for someone powerful, someone with reach. Anyone who gets between them and what they want ends up dead or worse." "Who do they work for?" She shook her head violently. "I cannot tell you that. The less you know, the safer you are." Fletcher took a careful step closer, and Zelda noticed that despite his size, he moved with a surprising gentleness, as though he was trying not to spook a frightened horse. "Miss Harrison, Zelda, if I may, I spent 3 years working security for mine operations in Colorado before I came here. I have dealt with hard men and corrupt bosses and everything in between. I am not easily frightened, and I do not abandon people who need help." The sincerity in his voice made something inside Zelda crack. She had been so alone for so long, carrying this weight by herself, terrified every moment of every day. The thought that someone might actually stand beside her, might actually care whether she lived or died, was almost too much to bear. "They will kill you," she whispered. "Maybe, but I would rather die doing the right thing than live knowing I turned my back on someone in need." He paused, then added with a small, sad smile, "My mother raised me better than that." Despite everything, despite the fear and the exhaustion and the bone-deep certainty that she was going to die in this little Montana town, Zelda felt the corner of her mouth twitch upward. "She sounds like a good woman. The best. She passed 2 years ago, but I try to live in a way that would make her proud." Fletcher's expression grew more serious. "Will you tell me what happened, please?" Zelda looked into those river-colored eyes and saw no deception, no hidden agenda. Just a man who genuinely wanted to help. It was such a foreign concept after the past 6 months that she almost did not trust it. But what choice did she have? She could stay silent and die alone, or she could take a chance on this cowboy with his mother's lessons still guiding him. She stepped back and opened the door wider. "You should come in. This is not a conversation for the hallway." Fletcher hesitated. "That would not be proper, Miss Harrison. Your reputation." "My reputation will not matter much when I am dead." He could not argue with that logic. He stepped inside, leaving the door open a few inches, a small gesture toward propriety that Zelda found oddly touching. He stood near the window, giving her space, while she sank down onto the edge of her narrow bed and finally set the pitcher aside. "I worked for a lawyer in Denver," she began, her voice low and tired. "Marcus Thornton. He was well respected, had important clients, including several mining companies and railroad interests. I was his secretary, handled his correspondence, kept his files organized. It was good work, respectable work, and it paid well enough that I could support myself and send a little money back to my sister in Ohio." Fletcher nodded but said nothing, just listened. "That 6 months ago, Mr. Thornton was working late on a contract dispute. I had stayed to finish typing some letters, and I was just putting on my coat to leave when I heard shouting from his office. Angry shouting. I should have left then, should have just walked out and gone home, but something made me stop, made me listen." She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the August heat. "There were men in his office, 3 of them, demanding that he change his testimony in an upcoming trial. A worker had been killed in a mine collapse, and the family was suing the company. Mr. Thornton had been hired to represent the family, and apparently he had found evidence that the company had ignored safety warnings, that the collapse was entirely preventable. And these men wanted him to bury that evidence. More than that, they wanted him to testify that the family was lying, that the worker had been drunk and caused the collapse himself. They offered him money, a lot of money. When he refused, they started making threats, told him they knew where his wife shopped, where his daughters went to school, told him accidents could happen to anyone." Fletcher's hands curled into fists at his sides. What did he do? He threw them out, told them he would not be intimidated, that he would see them in court and expose everything they were trying to hide. Zelda's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "They killed him 3 days later, made it look like a robbery gone wrong. The marshal ruled it an accident, case closed. The mining company brought in a new lawyer who settled with the family for a pittance and made sure no evidence ever saw the light of day." "But you saw those men. You heard what they said." "I saw them. I heard everything. And they saw me too when they left Mr. Thornton's office that night. I did not realize it at the time, thought I had been hidden in the shadows. But one of them, Garrett Mason, he recognized me 3 days after the funeral, cornered me outside the boarding house where I lived and told me very clearly what would happen if I spoke to anyone about what I had heard. That was when he gave me this. She touched the fading bruise on her cheek. As a warning, as a promise of worse to come. So you ran. I ran, quit my job, packed what I could carry, and took the first train heading anywhere that was not Denver. I thought Montana would be far enough. Thought a town this small, this remote, would be safe. She laughed bitterly. I was wrong. Fletcher was quiet for a long moment, processing everything she had told him. When he finally spoke, his voice was hard with anger barely held in check. Those men downstairs, one of them is this Garrett Mason? Yes, and two others. I don't know their names, but they were with him in Denver. They are here to finish what he started. Like hell they are. The words were spoken quietly, but with such absolute conviction that Zelda looked up sharply. Fletcher was staring out the window at the darkening street below, his jaw set and his eyes filled with a cold determination that was somehow more frightening than all of Garrett Mason's threats combined. You cannot fight them, Zelda said desperately. Fletcher, you don't understand what you are up against. These men are killers. They have powerful people protecting them. Even if you manage to stop them, there would just be more. The man they work for, he has deep pockets and a long reach. Then we go to the law, the territorial marshal, someone outside of Denver who is not on this man's payroll. You think I haven't thought of that? Fletcher, Marcus Thornton was a respected lawyer, a man with connections and resources, and they killed him like he was nothing. What chance does a secretary have? Who would believe me? Who would protect me long enough to even tell my story? She stood up, agitation making her pace the small room. No, the only way to survive this is to keep running. I need to leave Utica tonight, before they find out exactly where I am staying. Maybe head north to Canada, or west to California, somewhere far enough that they will eventually give up looking. Running is not living, Zelda. That is just a slower kind of death. The words hit her like a physical blow, because they were true. She had been running for 6 months, and every day she felt a little more of herself disappear. The woman she had been, confident and capable, and full of dreams for her future, was gone. In her place was this frightened shadow, always looking over her shoulder, always waiting for the other shoe to drop. What else can I do? She asked, and hated how broken she sounded. Fletcher turned from the window and crossed the room until he was standing directly in front of her. He was close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his blue-green eyes, could smell the scent of leather and horse and clean sweat that clung to him. He reached out slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away, and gently took both of her hands in his. His palms were rough with calluses, his fingers strong and steady. "You can let me help you," he said softly. "You can trust that you do not have to face this alone anymore. I know we just met. I know you have no reason to believe me. But I swear to you, on my mother's memory, that I will do everything in my power to keep you safe. Those men want to hurt you. They will have to go through me first." Tears burned in Zelda's eyes. Why? Why would you risk yourself for a stranger? Because it is the right thing to do. Because nobody deserves to live in fear the way you have been living. And because, he paused, something shifting in his expression, becoming softer and more vulnerable. Because when I saw you running through town this afternoon, terrified and alone, something in my chest just broke. I have not been able to stop thinking about you since. I know that probably sounds crazy, but it is the truth. Zelda stared at him, hardly daring to breathe. She had given up on kindness, had stopped believing that there were still good men in the world. And yet, here stood Fletcher Zimmerman, offering her protection and care without asking for anything in return, looking at her like she was something precious worth defending. "I am so tired of being afraid," she whispered. "I know, so let me be strong for you. Let me stand between you and the things that scare you." His thumbs rubbed gentle circles on the backs of her hands. "Will you trust me, Zelda? Please?" She should say no. She should thank him politely and then leave town under cover of darkness, disappear into the wilderness where Garrett Mason and his men would never find her. Getting Fletcher involved would only get him killed, and she could not bear to have another death on her conscience. But God help her. She was so tired. Tired of running, tired of being alone, tired of carrying this weight by herself. And when Fletcher looked at her with those earnest eyes, when he held her hands like they were something valuable that might break, She wanted so desperately to believe that maybe, just maybe, she had finally found someone who could help shoulder the burden. "Okay," she heard herself say. "Okay, I will trust you." The smile that broke across Fletcher's face was like sunrise after a long night. "Thank you. You will not regret this, I promise." He squeezed her hands once more before reluctantly releasing them. "Now, first things first. You stay here tonight, keep the door locked. I am going to go talk to the sheriff and see what kind of man he is. If he is honest, we will bring him into this. If not, we will figure out another plan. The sheriff is an older man, William Briggs. He seems kind enough, but I don't know if he has the spine to stand up to men like Garrett and his friends. Then we will find out. In the meantime, I want you to pack a bag with essentials. If things go badly, we may need to leave town quickly, and I want you ready." He grabbed a piece of paper from her small desk and scribbled something on it. "This is directions to my ranch. It is about 5 miles north of here, up near Crooked Creek. If anything happens, if you feel unsafe for even a moment, you take one of Mrs. Callahan's horses and you ride there. My foreman's name is Samuel, big fellow with a beard down to his chest. You tell him I sent you, and he will keep you safe until I can get there. Understand?" Zelda took the paper with shaking hands. "Fletcher, this is too much. I cannot ask you to put your home, your livelihood at risk for me." "You are not asking. I am offering. Big difference." He picked up his hat and settled it on his head, then moved toward the door. "Lock this behind me. Do not open it for anyone except Mrs. Callahan or me. If those men come here, you scream loud enough to wake the dead, and half this town will come running. And if they hurt people trying to get to me—" Fletcher paused in the doorway, his expression grave. "Then that is on them, not you. You hear me, Zelda? None of this is your fault. You witnessed a crime, you tried to do the right thing, and bad men are making you pay for it. But their choices, their actions, that is not on your conscience. That is on theirs." She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that she was not responsible for Marcus Thornton's death, for the danger she had brought to this small Montana town. But 6 months of guilt and fear were not so easily dismissed. Fletcher must have seen the doubt in her eyes because he stepped back into the room and, with a gentleness that made her heart ache, cupped her face in his hand. His palm was warm against her cheek, careful of the bruise. "You are a good person who got caught up in bad circumstances," he said quietly. "That does not make you responsible for the evil other people do. Remember that." Then he was gone, his boots echoing down the hallway, and Zelda was left standing in the middle of her small room with her hand pressed to the cheek he had touched, and a strange warmth spreading through her chest that felt almost like hope. She locked the door as he had instructed and began to pack. An hour later, there was a soft knock, followed by Mrs. Callahan's voice. "Dear, I have brought you some supper. Mr. Zimmerman told me you might be feeling poorly." Zelda opened the door to find the plump, gray-haired widow holding a tray laden with stew, fresh bread, and a pot of tea. Mrs. Callahan's eyes were kind but worried as she bustled into the room and set the tray on the small table. "That boy told me you are in some trouble," she said without preamble. "Did not give me details, said that was your business to share, or not, as you saw fit. But he did say you might need friends, and I want you to know that you have at least one here." The unexpected kindness made Zelda's throat tight. "Thank you, Mrs. Callahan. I am sorry to bring trouble to your door." "Nonsense. Trouble finds us all eventually. The question is what we do about it." The older woman poured tea into a cup and pressed it into Zelda's hands. "Mr. Zimmerman is a good man, one of the best. If he has taken it into his head to help you, then you are in capable hands. His father owned the ranch he runs now, and Fletcher has been working cattle since he was barely tall enough to reach the stirrups. He is tough, smart, and loyal as they come. You can trust him. I barely know him. Sometimes that does not matter. Sometimes you just know when someone is meant to be part of your story." Mrs. Callahan patted her hand. "Now eat your supper before it gets cold. You will need your strength." After the widow left, Zelda tried to eat, but found she had little appetite. Her mind kept replaying the feeling of Fletcher's hand on her face, the absolute certainty in his voice when he promised to protect her. She had known him for less than 2 hours, and yet something about him made her feel safer than she had in months. It was dangerous, this feeling. Dangerous to start caring about someone when her life was such a mess. If Fletcher got hurt because of her, because of the choice she had made to trust him, she would never forgive herself. But even as she thought it, She knew she was already past the point of no return. The moment she had opened her door to him, the moment she had looked into those river-colored eyes and seen genuine goodness looking back, some part of her had reached out and latched on tight. Whether she wanted it or not, Fletcher Zimmerman had become important to her. She could only pray that she would not get him killed. The night passed slowly. Zelda dozed in fits and starts, jerking awake at every sound, her heart racing. Each time, she would force herself to breathe slowly, to remind herself that she was safe, that Fletcher was out there somewhere working to help her. Fletcher. Even thinking his name made her feel steadier. Dawn was painting the sky in shades of rose and gold when she heard boots in the hallway again. A familiar knock. "Zelda, it is me, Fletcher." She unlocked the door quickly. He looked tired, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion, but he managed a small smile when he saw her. "Any trouble last night?" "No, you?" "Some. The sheriff is not exactly a pillar of strength, but he is honest at least. I told him enough to make him understand that you are in danger, and that the men at the saloon are not here for innocent reasons. He has agreed to keep an eye on them, and to back us up if things turn ugly." Fletcher leaned against the doorframe, rolling his shoulders as though trying to work out tension. "I also sent word to the territorial marshal in Miles City, letting him know the situation. With any luck, he will send deputies within a few days." "A few days is a long time when men like Garrett Mason are involved." "I know, which is why I have another plan." He straightened, his expression growing more focused. "I want you to come stay at my ranch. You will be safer there, away from town, and I have 6 men who work for me who would be happy to help keep watch. We can ford up if we need to. Make it clear that getting to you means going through all of us." Zelda shook her head. "I cannot ask that of you or your men. This is not their fight. They are good men, Zelda, hard workers, loyal. When I told Samuel what was happening, the first thing he said was that we should bring you out to the ranch where we could protect you properly. The others will feel the same way. They don't even know me. They know me, and they trust my judgment. If I say you are worth protecting, that is good enough for them." He reached out and took her hand, the gesture already becoming familiar. "Please, Zelda, let me do this. Let me take you somewhere I know you will be safe." She wanted to argue, wanted to insist that she could handle this on her own, but the truth was that she could not. Garrett Mason and his men were closing in, and if she stayed in town, it was only a matter of time before they made their move. At least at the ranch, surrounded by Fletcher and his men, she would have a fighting chance. "All right," she said softly. "When do we leave?" "As soon as you are ready. I have a wagon waiting out back. We will load your things and head out before the town wakes up properly. With luck, those men at the saloon will be sleeping off their liquor and will not notice you are gone until it is too late." They moved quickly and quietly. Fletcher carried her packed bags while Zelda followed him down the back stairs and out to where a sturdy wagon waited, hitched to 2 patient horses. Mrs. Callahan was there too, a basket in her hands. "Food for the road," she explained, settling the basket in the back of the wagon. "And you take care of this girl, Mr. Zimmerman. She is special." "Yes, madam, I know she is." The look he gave Zelda when he said it made her cheeks warm. They left Utica just as the sun cleared the horizon, painting the landscape in golden light. The road north was rutted but passable, cutting through open grassland dotted with sage and the occasional stand of cottonwoods. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still holding on to the last of winter's snow, despite the summer heat. Zelda had never been this far from town, and despite the fear that still gnawed at her, she could not help but appreciate the stark beauty of the landscape. It was so different from Denver's crowded streets and brick buildings. Out here, the sky seemed endless, and the air smelled of grass and earth and possibility. "It is beautiful," she said softly. Fletcher, managing the reins with easy competence, glanced over at her and smiled. "It is. I fell in love with this land the first time I saw it. My father brought us out here when I was 15, said he was tired of working for other men and wanted to build something of his own. My mother cried for a week, missing her family and her friends, but eventually even she came to love it. There is something about this place that gets into your blood." "How long have you been running the ranch?" 2 years, since my father died. Hart gave out one morning while he was checking the herd. He was here one moment and gone the next." Fletcher's voice was matter of fact, but Zelda could hear the old pain underneath. "My mother followed him 6 months later. Doctor said it was pneumonia, but I think it was really a broken heart. They had been together since they were 17, and she just could not figure out how to live without him. I am sorry. That must have been incredibly hard. It was. But in some ways, I am grateful they went the way they did. Quick, no suffering, and they are together now. That is what matters. He was quiet for a moment, then added, "They would have liked you." "You cannot possibly know that. You barely know me yourself." "I know enough. I know you are brave, even when you are terrified. I know you tried to do the right thing, even though it cost you everything. I know you have a good heart." He glanced at her again, and the warmth in his eyes made her breath catch. "That is the kind of person my parents taught me to value." Zelda did not know what to say to that, so she simply sat beside him in the wagon and let the sun warm her face and tried to remember what it felt like to not be constantly afraid. The ranch came into view about an hour later, nestled in a valley where Crooked Creek wound its way through the grassland. It was not grand by any means, just a cluster of buildings including a main house, a barn, a bunkhouse, and several corrals. But it was well maintained and clearly cared for, and when Fletcher pulled the wagon up to the main house, Zelda felt something in her chest ease slightly. A massive man with a beard that did indeed reach to his chest came out of the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. This had to be Samuel. "Got her safe then?" he called out, his voice a deep rumble. "Safe and sound. Samuel, this is Miss Zelda Harrison. Zelda, this is my foreman, Samuel Porter. Best cattleman in Montana and the ugliest, though do not tell him I said so." Samuel grinned, showing a gap in his front teeth. "Boy, I am better looking than you will ever be. Miss Harrison, welcome to Crooked Creek Ranch. Fletcher here has filled us in on your situation, and I want you to know that every man on this property will do whatever it takes to keep you safe. Those bastards, pardon my language, want to hurt you. They will have to kill all of us first." It was said so casually, so matter-of-factly, that Zelda almost laughed. "Thank you, Mr. Porter. I hope it does not come to that." "So do we, madam, but we will be ready if it does." Fletcher helped her down from the wagon, his hands steady on her waist, and Zelda was acutely aware of how right it felt to have him close. She barely knew this man, and yet some part of her was already adjusting to his presence, already craving his nearness. Dangerous. This was so dangerous. The main house was simple but comfortable, with a large common room dominated by a stone fireplace, a kitchen that smelled of coffee and bacon, and 2 bedrooms at the back. Fletcher showed her to the smaller of the 2, which had clearly been his mother's sewing room before being converted into a guest space. "It is not much," he said, setting her bags down. "But the door has a good lock, and my room is just across the hall. If you need anything at all, you just call out." "This is more than generous, Fletcher. Thank you." He hesitated in the doorway, as though there was something else he wanted to say. Finally, he just nodded and said, "Get some rest. You look exhausted. I will have Samuel postman around the property, and we will work out a watch schedule. Nobody will get close without us knowing." After he left, Zelda sank down onto the narrow bed and let herself finally, truly believe that maybe she was going to survive this. Maybe, with Fletcher and his men standing between her and the men who wanted her dead, she actually had a chance. And maybe, just maybe, she had found something else too. Something she had not been looking for, but desperately needed. Someone who made her feel seen and valued and protected. Someone who looked at her like she mattered. She was falling for Fletcher Zimmerman. It was foolish and impractical, and possibly the worst timing in the world, but there it was. In less than a day, this cowboy with his mother's lessons and his father's ranch had worked his way into her heart. She could only hope they both lived long enough to see where it might lead. 3 days passed in relative peace. Zelda helped around the ranch house, cooking meals and mending clothes and trying to make herself useful. Fletcher's men were polite and respectful, tipping their hats when they saw her and going out of their way to make her feel welcome. Samuel, in particular, seemed to have appointed himself as a sort of uncle figure, regaling her with stories about Fletcher's childhood and all the various scrapes and adventures he had gotten into. "Boy was always trying to save something," Samuel said one afternoon as they sat on the porch shelling peas. Birds with broken wings, dogs with injured paws, once even a coyote pup he found abandoned. His mother used to say he had a hero's heart, always wanting to fix what was broken and protect what was vulnerable. "That sounds like him," Zelda said softly, watching Fletcher across the yard as he worked with one of the younger horses, patient and gentle even when the animal shied away. He is a good man, best I have ever known. And the way he looks at you, well, I have not seen that boy look at anyone like that before. You are special to him, Miss Harrison. More special than I think either of you realizes yet. Zelda felt her cheeks warm. We barely know each other. Sometimes that does not matter. Sometimes you just know. Samuel gave her a knowing look. My wife, God rest her soul. I knew I was going to marry her 5 minutes after we met. Something about her just fit with something in me, like a key in a lock. Been 30 years since I lost her, and I still miss her every day. But I would not trade those 20 years we had together for anything. What happened to her? Cholera swept through our town fast and brutal. She was helping nurse the sick, and she caught it herself. Died within 3 days. His voice was gruff with old grief. But she died doing what she believed in, helping people who needed her. That was who she was. I am sorry. Samuel. Life is hard and short, Miss Harrison. That is why when you find something good, something real, you hold on to it with both hands and do not let go. Do not waste time worrying about whether it makes sense or whether it is too soon. If it feels right, then it is right. His words stayed with Zelda for the rest of the day. That night, as she helped Fletcher clean up after supper, she found herself watching him, noticing the way he moved with quiet efficiency, the way he hummed under his breath while he worked, the way he always made sure she was comfortable and safe. You are staring, he said, without looking up from the dishes he was washing. Sorry, I was just thinking. About what? About how strange it is that we met less than a week ago, and yet I feel like I have known you much longer. Fletcher dried his hands and turned to face her fully, his expression serious. I feel that too. Like you were someone I was supposed to meet, someone important. Does that sound crazy? A little, but I think I like it anyway. He smiled, that sunrise smile that made her heart skip. Good. Because I have to tell you, Zelda Harrison, I am developing some very inconvenient feelings for you. Feelings that probably make me 7 kinds of fool considering everything you are dealing with. But feelings I cannot seem to talk myself out of no matter how hard I try. Zelda's breath caught. What kind of feelings? The kind where I cannot stop thinking about you. The kind where I lie awake at night across the hall and wish I had an excuse to check on you just so I could see your face. The kind where the thought of anything happening to you makes me physically ill. He took a step closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. The kind where I am pretty sure I am falling in love with you, even though I know that is the most ridiculous thing in the world to say after less than a week. Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. Fletcher, you do not have to say anything back. I know this is terrible timing. I know you have bigger things to worry about than some cowboy's feelings. But I needed you to know, needed you to understand why I am so determined to keep you safe. Because you matter to me, Zelda. More than you should, more than makes sense. But there it is. She stared up at him. This good, brave man who had taken on her battles as his own, who had opened his home and his heart to a stranger. Samuel's words echoed in her mind. Life is hard and short, so when you find something good, you hold on tight. It is not ridiculous, she said softly, because I am falling for you too. Have been since the moment you promised to stand between me and the things that scare me. I have been alone for so long, Fletcher, so scared and alone. And then you walked into my life, and suddenly I could breathe again. Suddenly I could imagine a future beyond just surviving. That is not ridiculous. That is a miracle. The smile that broke across Fletcher's face was brilliant enough to light up the entire room. Can I kiss you? Yes. Please, yes. He cupped her face in both hands, so gentle, so careful, and lowered his mouth to hers. The kiss was soft and sweet and full of promise, a beginning rather than an ending. Zelda sighed into it, her hands coming up to grip his shirt, anchoring herself to this moment, to this man, to this feeling of rightness that filled her chest. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Fletcher rested his forehead against hers. I am going to marry you someday, Zelda Harrison. Just so you know. She laughed, the sound bright and happy, and so foreign after months of fear. That is very presumptuous of you, Fletcher Zimmerman. Maybe. But I know what I want, and I have never been one to dance around the truth. I want you. Want a life with you. Want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep with you every night. Want to build something real and lasting and good with you. We might not have the chance. Garrett Mason is still out there. Then we will deal with him, together, and then we will have the rest of our lives to figure out all the details. He kissed her again, quick and firm. Have faith, love. We will get through this. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that they could have a future, that this was not just a beautiful dream that would be ripped away the moment reality came crashing back in. But for this moment, in the warmth of Fletcher's embrace, with his heartbeat steady beneath her palm, she let herself hope. Reality came crashing back the next afternoon. Zelda was hanging laundry on the line behind the house, enjoying the sunshine and the simple domestic task, when she heard shouting from the front of the property. Her blood went cold. She dropped the sheet she was holding and ran toward the sound, her heart in her throat. Fletcher and Samuel were standing at the gate, along with 3 of the other ranch hands. On the other side of the fence sat 3 men on horseback. Even from a distance, Zelda recognized Garrett Mason's cruel smile. "Miss Harrison," he called out when he spotted her. "There you are. Been looking all over for you." Fletcher moved to block her view, but Zelda stepped around him. If Garrett had tracked her here, hiding would not help. "What do you want?" she called back, proud that her voice barely shook. "You know what I want, sweetheart. You know things you should not know, saw things you should not have seen. I am here to make sure you do not share those things with anyone else." "You mean you are here to kill me?" Garrett laughed. "Well, I was trying to be polite about it, but yes, though it does not have to be today. You come with us now, quiet-like, and maybe we will make it quick and painless. You make us work for it, and things get a lot uglier for everyone involved, including your new friends here." "She is not going anywhere with you," Fletcher said, his voice hard as stone. "You want her, you will have to go through me. Happy to, Cowboy. You and what army? Me and my men, all 6 of us, armed and ready to defend this property and everyone on it. You really want to test those odds?" Garrett's smile faltered slightly as he assessed the situation. He had brought 2 men with him, and while they were clearly dangerous, they were outnumbered. Still, Zelda could see him calculating, weighing his options. "This does not have to be a fight," Garrett said. "Just hand over the girl and we will be on our way. No harm to you or yours. No, she is under my protection now, and I do not break my word. Noble. Stupid, but noble." Garrett's expression hardened. "You have no idea what you are getting into, boy. The man I work for, he has more money and power than you could dream of. He will crush you like a bug if you get in his way. Then I guess I will die standing up for what is right. Better than living on my knees." Fletcher's hand moved to the gun at his hip, a casual gesture that was nevertheless full of threat. "Now, I suggest you and your friends ride out of here before things get messy." For a long, tense moment, nobody moved. Zelda held her breath, certain that violence was about to erupt. But then one of the men with Garrett, a thin fellow with a scar across his cheek, leaned over and said something low in Garrett's ear. Garrett scowled but nodded. "All right, Cowboy, you want to play hero? That is your choice. But this is not over. Not by a long shot. We will be back, and next time we will bring more men. See how long you and your little army last then." "We will be ready," Fletcher said calmly. Garrett shot Zelda one last venomous look, then wheeled his horse around and galloped away, his 2 companions following. They watched until the 3 men disappeared over the horizon, and even then, nobody relaxed. "That went about as well as could be expected," Samuel said grimly. "But he meant what he said. They will be back, and they will bring reinforcements." "I know." Fletcher turned to look at Zelda, and she saw fear in his eyes for the first time. Not fear for himself, but fear for her. "We need to get word to the territorial marshal. Tell him the situation is escalating, and we need to prepare for a siege. If Mason brings back a dozen men, we are going to have a fight on our hands." "I should leave," Zelda said desperately. "I should take a horse and head for Canada like I originally planned. If I am gone, they will have no reason to attack the ranch. You will all be safe." "No." Fletcher grabbed her shoulders, his grip firm, but not painful. "No, Zelda. You are not running again. Running has not kept you safe so far, and it will not keep you safe now. Those men will hunt you until they catch you, and then you will be alone and vulnerable. At least, here you have people who will fight for you. I cannot let you all die for me. You are not letting us do anything. We are choosing this, choosing to stand with you against bullies and killers. That is what good people do." His eyes bored into hers, intense and unwavering. "Do you trust me, Zelda?" "Yes." "Then trust me now. Trust that we can survive this, together." She wanted to argue, wanted to insist that she was not worth the risk. But the determination in Fletcher's face, the solidarity she could see in Samuel and the other men, made her realize that this was not just about her anymore. This had become about standing up to evil, about refusing to let bad men win. And these cowboys, these good, brave men, were willing to put their lives on the line for that principle. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay. We do this together." Fletcher pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest while his heart thundered beneath her ear. "We will get through this. I promise." The next 2 days were a flurry of preparation. The men reinforced the fences, stocked ammunition, and set up watch positions around the property. Fletcher rode into town and finally managed to get a telegram through to the territorial marshal, explaining the situation and begging for help. The response was frustratingly vague, promising that deputies would be sent as soon as possible, but giving no specific timeline. "Could be 2 days, could be 2 weeks, Fletcher said grimly when he returned. "We have to be ready to handle this ourselves." Zelda learned to shoot. Fletcher spent hours with her behind the barn, teaching her how to hold a rifle, how to aim, how to breathe through the kick. She was not naturally talented, but she was determined, and by the end of the second day she could at least hit a target more often than not. "You are doing good," Fletcher said, standing behind her with his arms around her, adjusting her grip. "Real good. I know this is not how you wanted to spend your time, but it is important that you can defend yourself if things go bad." "If things go bad, you mean if you get hurt trying to protect me?" She lowered the rifle and turned in his arms. "Fletcher, if something happens to you because of me, I will never forgive myself." "Then I guess I better make sure nothing happens." He smiled, but it did not quite reach his eyes. "I am not planning on dying, Zelda. I have too much to live for now, too many plans for our future." "What kind of plans?" "Well, first I am going to court you properly, take you to town for dinner, maybe a dance if we can find one, show you off to everyone and make sure they know you were spoken for. Then, in a few months, once all this ugliness is behind us, I am going to ask you to marry me, and you are going to say yes, and we are going to have a wedding right here on the ranch with all our friends there to celebrate. And then, we are going to build a life together, raise some kids, grow old watching the sun set over the mountains. That is the plan." Tears stung Zelda's eyes. "That sounds like a perfect plan. Then let's make sure it happens. Let's survive this and have that future we both want." He kissed her softly, tenderly, a promise sealed with touch. That night, unable to sleep, Zelda sat on the porch and looked up at the stars. They were so bright out here, away from city lights, a blanket of silver across the black sky. She tried to imagine the future Fletcher had described, tried to see herself married and happy and safe. It seemed impossible, and yet she wanted it with a fierce desperation that surprised her. She heard the door open behind her and knew without looking that it was Fletcher. He sat down beside her on the steps, close enough that their shoulders touched. "Could not sleep either?" he asked. "Too much on my mind." "Want to talk about it?" "I am scared, terrified really. Not just of dying, but of losing this. Losing you. I only just found you, Fletcher. The thought that we might not get our chance is unbearable." He took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "We will get our chance. I feel it in my bones. This is not how our story ends, Zelda. This is just the hard part before the happy ending." "You sound very certain." "I am, because I refuse to accept any other outcome, because I have to believe that the universe is not cruel enough to put you in my path, only to tear you away. Because I love you, and love like this does not come around often. When it does, you fight for it with everything you have." She turned to look at him, this cowboy who had become her entire world in less than 2 weeks. "I love you too, Fletcher. I think I have from the moment you offered to help me. That was quick. Sometimes you just know." She smiled, remembering Samuel's words. "Like a key in a lock." Exactly like that. He pulled her closer, tucking her against his side. "No matter what happens tomorrow or the next day, know that this has been real, that what we have is real. That is something nobody can take away from us. They sat like that for a long time, holding each other under the stars, stealing what peace they could before the storm came. The storm arrived at dawn 3 days later. Zelda woke to the sound of gunfire and men shouting. She scrambled out of bed, her heart racing, and ran to the window. What she saw made her blood run cold. At least a dozen men were attacking the ranch, coming from multiple directions. Garrett Mason was leading them, firing at the barn, where Samuel and 2 other ranch hands had taken cover. Fletcher was in the yard, using a water trough for protection as he returned fire. This was it. The fight she had been dreading. Zelda grabbed the rifle Fletcher had given her and ran outside, her hands shaking but her mind oddly clear. She took up position behind a wagon and began firing at the attackers, not trying to hit them necessarily, just trying to make them keep their heads down and think twice about advancing. "Zelda, get back inside!" Fletcher shouted when he saw her. "No, I am not hiding while you all fight for me." She fired again, and one of the attackers yelped and ducked behind a tree. The battle was chaos. Bullets flew, men screamed, smoke filled the air. Zelda lost track of time, just kept loading and firing. Her world narrowed down to the rifle in her hands and the men trying to kill everyone she cared about. She saw one of Fletcher's men go down, clutching his shoulder, saw another take a bullet to the leg and drag himself toward the barn, saw Fletcher moving through the chaos like something feral and protective, his aim deadly accurate as he dropped one attacker and then another. But there were so many of them. Too many. Garrett Mason seemed to realize that the frontal assault was not working. He called his men back, and they retreated to a safe distance, regrouping. Zelda used the lull to run to Fletcher, who was reloading with grim efficiency. "Are you hurt?" she asked, checking him over frantically. "I am fine. You?" "Fine. But Fletcher, there are too many. We cannot hold them off forever." "I know, but we just need to hold them until the marshal arrives. He has to be close by now." "And if he is not?" Fletcher met her eyes, and she saw the truth there. If help did not come soon, they were going to lose this fight, and losing meant dying. "Then we make our stand," he said simply. "We fight until we cannot fight anymore, but we do not give up, and we do not let them have you. Understood?" She nodded, her throat too tight for words. The second wave of the attack was worse than the first. Garrett's men had spread out, surrounding the ranch, making it impossible to defend all sides at once. The barn caught fire, and Samuel and his companions had to abandon it, racing across the open yard while bullets kicked up dirt around their feet. Fletcher was hit. Zelda saw him stagger, saw blood bloom across his shirt, and her heart stopped. But he kept fighting, kept moving, kept putting himself between her and the men trying to kill her. She fired again and again, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the rifle. One of the attackers made it into the yard, charging at her with a knife. She tried to aim, tried to shoot, but her fingers would not cooperate. The man was 5 feet away when Fletcher tackled him from the side, the two of them going down in a tangle of limbs and violence. They fought viciously, desperately. The man was bigger than Fletcher, but Fletcher was fighting for something more important than money or orders. He was fighting for love, for a future, for the woman he had promised to protect. Zelda could not get a clear shot, could not help without risking hitting Fletcher. She watched in horror as the 2 men rolled across the ground, each trying to gain the upper hand. The knife flashed in the morning light, and Fletcher cried out. Blood. There was so much blood. But Fletcher did not stop. With a roar of pure determination, he managed to wrench the knife away and drive it into the man's chest. The attacker went still. Fletcher staggered to his feet, swaying. Zelda ran to him, catching him before he could fall. "I am all right," he gasped, though blood was streaming from wounds in his side and shoulder. "I am all right. Just need a minute. You need a doctor. Later. Right now, I need to keep you safe." The gunfire had stopped. Zelda looked around and realized that the attackers were pulling back again, this time in earnest. She could see Garrett Mason arguing with some of his men, pointing back toward the ranch. They were giving up. They had lost too many men, and Fletcher's defenders had proven tougher than expected. But Garrett himself was not done. She could see it in the way he sat his horse, staring at the ranch with cold fury. He was not leaving without one more try. He drew his gun and spurred his horse forward, charging directly at Zelda and Fletcher. Time seemed to slow down. Zelda tried to raise her rifle, but her arms felt like lead. Fletcher was injured, barely able to stand, and his gun was empty. They were defenseless. Garrett raised his pistol, aiming directly at Zelda's chest. She could see his finger tightening on the trigger, could see the hate in his eyes. And then Fletcher was moving, pushing himself in front of her, putting his body between her and the bullet. "No!" Zelda screamed, but Fletcher was already raising his gun. His hands were shaking, blood dripping from his wounds, his body barely able to stand. But his aim was true. He fired. The bullet caught Garrett Mason square in the chest. The man's eyes widened in shock, and then he toppled from his horse, hitting the ground hard. He did not get up. Fletcher collapsed immediately after, his strength finally giving out. Zelda caught him, lowering him to the ground as gently as she could. "Fletcher, stay with me. Please stay with me." "Is he dead?" Fletcher's voice was faint. Zelda looked over at Garrett's still form. "Yes, he is dead." "Good. You are safe then. That is all that matters. You are going to be fine. You hear me? You are going to be fine because you promised me a future, and I am holding you to that promise." He smiled weakly. "Bossy woman. Damn right I am. Now stay awake. Help is coming." And miraculously it was. Samuel was running toward them, shouting that riders were coming up the road. Riders wearing badges. The territorial marshal had finally arrived, along with half a dozen deputies. But they were too late to help with the fight. The fight was already over, decided by a cowboy with shaking hands and true aim, fighting for the woman he loved. The next few hours were a blur. The marshal took statements, arrested the surviving attackers, and confirmed that Garrett Mason and 3 of his men were dead. The others had fled back toward Denver, though the marshal promised they would be hunted down and brought to justice. A doctor was summoned from town to tend to the wounded. 2 of Fletcher's men had serious injuries but would survive. Fletcher himself had lost a lot of blood and needed stitches in multiple places, but the doctor assured Zelda that he would make a full recovery with rest and care. "You are lucky," the doctor told Fletcher as he worked. "That knife wound in your side came within an inch of something vital. Any deeper, and you would have bled out before I got here." "Lucky," Fletcher repeated, looking at Zelda, who sat beside his bed holding his hand. "That is one word for it. I prefer blessed." Over the following days, as the ranch slowly returned to some semblance of normal, the full story came out. The marshal had been investigating the same mining company that Garrett Mason worked for, following a trail of corruption and violence that stretched across 3 territories. Zelda's testimony, combined with evidence the marshal had gathered, was enough to bring charges against the company's owner and several of his top lieutenants. "You did the right thing," the marshal told her before he left. "Speaking up, testifying, that takes courage, Miss Harrison. Most people would have just kept their heads down and hoped someone else would deal with it. The world needs more people like you." Zelda did not feel particularly brave. She felt exhausted and traumatized and profoundly grateful to be alive. But she appreciated the sentiment. Fletcher healed slowly but steadily. Zelda appointed herself his primary nurse, changing his bandages and forcing him to rest when he tried to get up and work too soon. They spent long afternoons on the porch, her reading to him, or just talking, getting to know each other in the quieter, deeper ways that came after the crisis had passed. "Tell me about your sister," Fletcher said one day, "the one in Ohio." "Mary. She is 3 years older than me, married to a shopkeeper. They have 2 little ones, a boy and a girl. She writes me letters every week, full of news about the children and the town and all the normal, boring things that make up a life." Zelda smiled. "I have not written her in months. I was too scared that my letters would somehow lead Garrett to me. But I need to write her soon. Tell her I am safe. Tell her I have met someone." "You could do more than tell her. You could invite her to visit. Invite her to a wedding, maybe." Zelda's heart skipped. "Are you asking me something, Fletcher Zimmerman?" "Not yet. When I ask you properly, I am going to be on my feet and healed and able to do it right, but I am letting you know that it is coming, so you better start thinking about your answer." "I already know my answer. That right? Care to share?" She leaned over and kissed him softly. "You will have to wait and see." 6 weeks after the attack, Fletcher's wounds had healed enough that the doctor pronounced him fit for normal activity. That evening, he asked Zelda to walk with him down to the creek. The September air was cool and clear, the first hints of autumn coloring the leaves of the cottonwoods. They stood beside the water, watching it flow past, silver in the fading light. Fletcher took both of her hands in his expression serious and tender all at once. "Zelda Harrison, I have done a lot of thinking over the past weeks, thinking about what matters, about what I want out of life, and I keep coming back to the same answer. You. I want you. Want to spend every day for the rest of my life making you happy, keeping you safe, loving you the way you deserve to be loved. So I am asking right now, properly and with my whole heart, will you marry me?" Zelda's eyes filled with tears, but they were happy tears, joyful tears. "Yes, yes, Fletcher, I will marry you. I cannot imagine anything I want more." His smile was radiant as he pulled her into his arms and kissed her, long and deep and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathless and grinning like fools. "I do not have a ring yet," he said, "but I will get you one, I promise, the prettiest one I can find. I do not need a ring, I just need you. You have me, for now and always." They were married in October, on a crisp afternoon when the mountains were painted with gold and red and the sky was a brilliant, endless blue. Zelda wore a dress that Mrs. Callahan and two other women from town had helped her sew, pale blue with tiny white flowers embroidered at the collar. Fletcher wore his best suit, brushed clean and pressed, looking so handsome that Zelda's breath caught when she saw him. The ceremony took place in front of the ranch house, with Samuel officiating and every person from town who could make the trip in attendance. Mary had come all the way from Ohio with her husband and children, and Zelda cried when she saw her sister for the first time in over a year. "You found a good man," Mary whispered as they hugged. "I am so happy for you, Zelda. After everything you went through, you deserve this happiness." "I really do, don't I?" Zelda laughed through her tears. "I am the luckiest woman alive." When Fletcher took her hands and spoke his vows, his voice was steady and sure. "I promise to love you, protect you, and stand by your side through whatever comes. I promise to be your partner, your best friend, your safe harbor in every storm. I promise to build a life with you that honors the courage it took for both of us to get here. You are my heart, Zelda. Today and always." Zelda's own vows were simpler, but no less heartfelt. "You saved my life in every way a person can be saved. You gave me hope when I had none, showed me kindness when I expected only cruelty, and loved me when I thought I would never be loved again. I promise to spend the rest of my days being worthy of that gift. I promise to love you with everything I am. You are my miracle, Fletcher, my answered prayer." When they kissed as husband and wife, the gathered crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Samuel was wiping his eyes, not even trying to hide his tears. Mrs. Callahan was beaming like a proud mother. The celebration lasted well into the evening, with food and music and dancing. Fletcher waltzed Zelda around the yard under strings of lantern light, holding her close and whispering all the things he planned to do to make her happy. "We are going to have a good life," he promised, "the best life, full of love and laughter and all the beautiful ordinary moments that make up a marriage." "We already do," Zelda replied, resting her head on his chest as they swayed. "Just being with you is everything I ever wanted." Life on the ranch settled into a peaceful rhythm. Zelda took to ranching with surprising ease, learning to ride properly and help with the cattle. She also started teaching reading and writing to some of the children from town, holding classes twice a week in the ranch's main room. It gave her purpose and helped her feel connected to the community that had welcomed her. Fletcher proved to be exactly the husband he had promised to be, loving, supportive, and endlessly patient. They had their disagreements, of course, but they always worked through them with honesty and respect. The bond between them, forged in crisis and strengthened by choice, only grew deeper with time. In the spring of 1883, Zelda discovered she was pregnant. She told Fletcher one evening as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, his arm around her shoulders. "I am going to have a baby," she said simply. Fletcher went very still. Then he turned to look at her, his eyes wide with wonder. "Truly? Truly?" "The doctor confirmed it this afternoon when I went into town." A grin spread across his face, bright and joyful. "We are having a baby. Zelda, we are having a baby." He pulled her into his lap, holding her close and laughing with pure delight. "This is the best news, the very best." "You are happy then?" "Happy does not even begin to cover it. I am ecstatic, overjoyed, beside myself. He kissed her thoroughly, then pulled back to look at her with sudden concern. Are you all right? Is the baby all right? Do you need anything? Should you be resting? She laughed at his instant transformation into a worried mother hen. I am fine. We are both fine. The doctor says everything looks good, and I should be able to continue my normal activities for several more months. I am going to take such good care of you, both of you. You will not want for anything. He kept that promise. As Zelda's pregnancy progressed, Fletcher fussed over her constantly, making sure she was comfortable and well-fed and not overdoing it. It was endearing and occasionally a bit much, but Zelda loved him for it. Their son was born in December, arriving during the first snowfall of winter. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Zelda thought she could not possibly continue. But Fletcher stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand and wiping her forehead, and telling her how strong she was, how brave, how much he loved her. When the baby finally arrived, healthy and squalling, Fletcher cried, actually cried, tears streaming down his face as he looked at the tiny person they had created together. He is perfect, he whispered, running one finger gently down the baby's cheek. Absolutely perfect. They named him Thomas, after Fletcher's father, with the middle name James, after Zelda's father. Little Tommy had his mother's dark hair and his father's blue-green eyes, and from the moment he entered the world, he owned both their hearts completely. The years that followed were full and rich. Tommy grew into a bright, curious boy who loved the ranch and the animals and following his father around, imitating everything he did. 2 years after Tommy, Zelda gave birth to a daughter they named Rose, who had Fletcher's blonde hair and a temperament as sunny as her name suggested. 3 years after that came another son, William, who was quieter than his siblings, but just as loved. The ranch prospered. Fletcher expanded the operation, buying more land and more cattle, building a reputation for quality stock and honest dealing. Zelda's school grew too, eventually requiring a proper schoolhouse that the town built with donated labor and materials. Through it all, through the hard work and the sleepless nights with babies and the occasional setback that came with ranching life, Fletcher and Zelda's love remained constant. They still stole moments together on the porch in the evenings, still danced in the kitchen when the children were asleep, still looked at each other with the same wonder and gratitude they had felt on that day when Fletcher had promised to stand between her and the things that scared her. Samuel grew old gracefully, eventually retiring from active work, but refusing to leave the ranch. He became a beloved grandfather figure to the children, telling them stories and teaching them about cattle and life. When he passed peacefully in his sleep at the age of 73, the whole town mourned. They buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch, where he could watch over the land and the people he had loved. Mary and her family visited regularly, the cousins growing up close despite the distance. Zelda never forgot how alone she had felt in those dark months when she was running from Garrett Mason, and she made sure her home was always open to anyone who needed shelter or support. Fletcher sometimes thought back to that day in 1882, when Mrs. Callahan had asked him to check on a frightened young woman hiding in her boarding house. How his entire life had changed in that moment, how one choice to help a stranger in need had led to everything good and beautiful in his world. Do you ever regret it? Zelda asked him one evening, many years later. They were in their 50s now, their hair streaked with gray, their faces lined with years of laughter and love. The children were grown, building their own lives, though they all stayed close. Tommy was running the ranch alongside Fletcher. Rose had married a teacher and was living in town. William was studying law, determined to fight injustice the way his mother had. Regret what? Fletcher asked, pulling her closer on the porch swing they had installed years ago. That day you decided to help me. It put you in so much danger. You were shot, nearly killed. You could have just walked away, stayed safe. Fletcher tilted her face up to look at him, his expression tender. Zelda Zimmerman, marrying you was the best decision I ever made. Helping you that day, standing up to those men, fighting for you, I would do it all again in a heartbeat. Every choice, every moment that led us here, I would repeat without hesitation. You and our children and this life we built together. That is not just good, that is everything. She smiled, that same smile that had captured his heart all those years ago. I love you, Fletcher, more with every passing year. And I love you, my brave, beautiful wife, my greatest adventure. They sat together as the sun set over the Montana mountains, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold. Two people who had found each other in the darkness and built a life full of light. The cowboy who had faced the men who hurt her, his hands shaking but his aim true, protecting the woman he loved. And the woman who had been saved not just from death, but from a life without hope, without love, without the future she had thought was lost forever. Their story had started with fear and violence, but it had become something beautiful, a testament to courage, to love, to the power of choosing to do right even when it was hard. They had faced down evil together and emerged on the other side stronger, more connected, more grateful for every ordinary moment they shared. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Fletcher kissed his wife's temple and whispered, "Thank you for trusting me that day, for giving me the chance to love you." "Thank you for being the kind of man worth trusting," she replied, "for showing me that heroes are real and that happy endings are possible." They held each other close, two souls who had found their home in each other, and knew without doubt that whatever else life might bring, they would face it together, just as they always had, just as they always would. Their children would tell their story to their own children someday, the tale of how Grandma Zelda had been saved by Grandpa Fletcher, how he had stood against impossible odds to protect her, how his love had been strong enough to change both their lives forever. It would become family legend, the kind of story that reminded each new generation that courage and love were worth fighting for. But for Fletcher and Zelda themselves, it was not a legend. It was simply their life, their love, their truth. A cowboy and the woman he saved, a woman and the man who loved her enough to face down her demons. Two people who found each other at exactly the right moment and chose, every single day after, to keep choosing each other. And they lived, truly lived, happily ever after in that little Montana valley, surrounded by family and friends and the land they loved. Their story did not end with that dramatic confrontation, or even with their wedding. It continued through decades of shared joy and sorrow, triumph and struggle, all the beautiful ordinary moments that make up a well-lived life. When they were very old, sitting together on that same porch where they had shared so many sunsets, Fletcher took Zelda's wrinkled hand in his own and said, "You know, I think we did all right." She laughed, the sound still bright despite her years. "All right? Fletcher Zimmerman, we did better than all right. We did wonderful." "Yes," he agreed, smiling at her with all the love of a lifetime in his eyes. "Yes, we did." And in the golden light of another Montana sunset, they sat together in perfect contentment. A love story that had started with terror and ended with triumph, a testament to the power of one person choosing to stand up for another, to fight for what was right, to love with courage and conviction. The cowboy had faced the men who hurt her, his hands shaking, but his aim true. And in doing so, he had not only saved her life, but found his own salvation. Together, they had built something that would last long after they were gone, a legacy of love and courage that would inspire generations. Their story was complete, every thread woven together, every promise kept, every dream fulfilled. A happy ending earned through bravery and love, as real and solid as the Montana earth beneath their feet, and as endless as the big sky above their heads.